Hello, my name is Thane and I like to experiment with AI art. On Wednesday 28th of December 2022, there were no actual office hours like usually. Instead, some of the mods and devs gathered for an impromptu non-office hours and casually chatted and answered some questions. During this time, they hinted at there being secret styles in Midjourney version 4 in addition to Style 4B and Style 4A. Now one of them has been discovered and it is -- style cursed. With default settings, the secret style looks quite ugly, it's grainy and the images don't look very good. I thought this would be a very short video, but then I made a discovery that is a complete game changer, so stay tuned for that. In this video I will be doing an in-depth analysis of what kind of images are generated with this style, with my usual simple prompts. I have used the seed 777 with all the images. So let's see what secrets we uncover. Sphere. So the default images do look very ugly, although they look completely different from the other styles. They almost look like they're printed on canvas. The discovery I made was when you add stylize 1000 to the prompt, then you get images like this. There is still some graininess in some of the images, but upscaling seems to help improve that somewhat. I really like these images. Yes, there is an image made of nonsense text in the landscape aspect ratio, but otherwise we get some very nice and almost realistic looking sci-fi spheres. I think my favorite is the portrait aspect ratio, because of the fishbowl. Landscape. The default landscape images for cursed style look quite terrible. But with maxed out stylize we get these. Some of these images look basically like photographs. Still a lot of graininess, but it's closest to photographic style I've seen from Midjourney version 4. There's a lot of spherical formations here as well, even though I did not add it to the prompt, it does it on its own. Winning point goes to square aspect ratio. Tree. Okay, here we have the very ugly trees of the cursed style. And this is the result with stylize 1000. The colors do tend to be quite muted, looking like very old color photographs that have been sitting in a box somewhere and lost their colors pretty much in the process. But the stylization gives some nice results to these. My favorite is the square aspect ratio. Woman. These women definitely look very cursed. But the stylize 1000 women look significantly less cursed. The images look still somewhat grainy, but upscaling even the grainy ones definitely improves the images a lot. Yes, they don't get as sharp, but a lot better still. And it's kind of funny how this style features a lot of autumn or winter fashion, with most of the women having scarves on. All of the aspect ratios have some issues with them, but I think I like the portrait aspect ratio the most despite the borders. The quality is just the best one and there's most detail in these images. Abstract. I don't even know what to say about these. They maybe are abstract. Oddly, the abstract images seem to have a mixture of spheres, landscapes and trees. They look partly abstract, but not so abstract as the other styles do. But I do like these a lot. My favorite ratio is portrait aspect ratio. I may be biased towards the dripping paint style for some reason. Angel. And here we have some really ugly angels. The portrait aspect ratio seems especially ugly. The stylize doesn't really help that much. Seems to be adding some angel statues in the images. Some pictures that are generated here actually look like photographs if you get past the graininess. Nothing especially noteworthy here. I guess I might like the landscape aspect ratio the most of these, but they're all quite bad. Animal. These are actually quite realistic if you get past the graininess. I actually like this walking leopard, so I tried to see if upscaling it helps to improve the image. So yeah, it looks quite realistic, but the quality is like from an old VCR tape or something. I'm actually quite amazed by these. They look like very realistic photographs. Cute bunnies and squirrels and foxes. I like that the animals are splashing around in water or snow. Some animals may be something that doesn't actually exist in nature, but I really do prefer these animals to the default 4B style animals currently. It's so hard to pick my favorite out of these, because they're all so good. I think the win goes to landscape aspect ratio this time. Architecture. I kind of like these too, they're great examples of somewhat older modern architecture. Some borders here and there and other small faults, but really different from the default style. With the Stylize 1000, the architecture is transformed from modern to really futuristic and wonderful pod houses. Not traditional at all, but I really love this kind of architectural style. It's very difficult to select my favorites again, but I think I'll go with the portrait aspect ratio for the clearest images, most detail and overall coolest looking houses. Blueprint. These are blue. They're printed. They look nothing like blueprints. And this is not what I had in mind when I prompted this. Seems to generate some blue-printed ladies. Some of the images are quite nice. I especially like these two. There's that ink splotted and dripping style again. So the favorite is portrait aspect ratio. Cartoon. These are not that bad. They look like children's drawings mostly. So the Stylize 1000 seems to create all female characters. Quite many of them are in anime style, they may be some kind of superheroes, they seem to be wearing bikini tops and they are really muscular. And the other ones are angry little girls. Or this one that is kind of both. Out of these I think my favorite is the square aspect ratio for most variety in imagery. Darkness. Very sinister images. Nothing fantastic here. This one is really creepy. The Stylize 1000 seems to improve the images somewhat. I still do prefer the other styles more with this prompt. Just notice that this one has a Batman logo on it. But overall I think the portrait aspect ratio looks the best out of these. Emblem. Very simple designs. Not very impressive. They look like they're stitched on cloth mostly. And here are the emblems with Stylize 1000. Some of these look quite nice. There's lots of birds and they're nicely colorful. Due to the graininess of the cursed style, most of these look kind of like very detailed embroidery. My favorite out of these is the portrait aspect ratio. Fire. These have nothing to do with fire. And they're ugly. And the Stylize 1000 doesn't add much fire either. There's something reminiscent of fire on this image here. But we get some quite fierce looking ladies. Even though there's nothing fire related on these images, I do prefer these to the default Midjourney style where the ladies are usually on fire themselves. My favorite out of these is the portrait aspect ratio. It has the most clearest images. Flower. Some of them might even look like flowers. I actually kind of like this one. And the Stylize 1000 creates some quite photorealistic, but surreal flowers. They look really alien. There are some nice water droplets on most of them, seems to be Midjourney's style. This one is completely different from the others and not in a good way. So out of these my favorite is the landscape aspect ratio. Heart. Surprisingly there are some images here that are quite sharp looking. And it looks like the cursed style prefers to generate the symbol of heart instead of anatomical hearts. And the Stylize 1000 seems to be adding some touches of the anatomical hearts in a mechanical way. All of the hearts are now very intricate and ornate. All the hearts are mostly still shaped like the symbol of heart. And they are all made of some kind of metal. My favorite is the square aspect ratio this time. Other aspect ratios have some borders or are clipped off from some edges. Infographic. These look like advertisements in a gibberish language. But hey, they're not that grainy. And the Stylize 1000 doesn't improve the images at all. Now they look like newspaper articles in addition to advertisements. I guess the point for the favorite goes to square aspect ratio for no borders and no clipping. Let's move on. Logo. I guess these look like logos. Very old logos. And Stylize 1000 makes the logos look like not logos at all. We have some people now in the ink splotted style. I do like the style, but these don't really look like logos to me. They look quite similar to the fire images with less orange. I like the portrait aspect ratio the most out of these. Map. And in maps we see some images that look like part of a map. Maybe. Some contours are kind of recognizable. But the Stylize 1000 really upgrades the maps. I absolutely love these. They have some awesome double exposure going on in some of the images, and there's actual maps on some of the images. The point for the favorite goes to landscape aspect ratio for most map-looking imagery. Planet. These are round. And many of them have text on it that tries to spell the word planet, but fails miserably. And the Stylize 1000 gives some desert vibes here to many of the images. They don't look anything like planets. There's still some borders and some odd text on some of the images. So favorite point goes to square aspect ratio that has the most upscale worthy images, even though they're not planets. Okay, the images are of spherical objects on a desert planet, I guess. Robot. And then we go from nothing related to the prompt to actually robots as were requested. Ugly and grainy, but robots. But the Stylize 1000 really cranks it up. All of these robots are amazing. I upscaled all of them. There's so much variety in them too. These also seem to get the desert landscape as background interestingly. My favorite point goes to the portrait aspect ratio. Schematic. I guess these look like some kinds of schematics. And the Stylize 1000 makes these images look way less like schematics. These look like devices from the 80s. Maybe a little bit pixel art too. Some of the images look quite nice with this styling. My favorite is the square aspect ratio, although I like these images and these images from the portrait and landscape ratios a lot as well. Skull. And here we have some very cursed looking skulls of the cursed style. But the Stylize 1000 gives the skulls some extra horns and Native American headdresses with feathers. I like these a lot. There are some Paradise Island imagery in these two images too. And this one kind of reminds me of Dia de los Muertos skulls. And there even doesn't seem to be any skulls with 3 or 4 rows of teeth. My favorite out of these is the portrait aspect ratio. Statue. From the very awesome skulls we go to very grainy and ugly statues. And the Stylize 1000 doesn't really improve stuff. Mostly the images are of basically the same guy with a statue that looks like him. It's difficult to choose my favorite ratio, because all of them look quite bad. I guess the landscape aspect ratio is the least bad, because portrait ratio looks too cramped and I really don't like the square aspect ratio images. Waterfall. So from very cursed statues we go to newspaper pictures of waterfalls. I guess some of the default cursed style waterfalls could look somewhat okay when upscaled. And the Stylize 1000 does really improve the images. Maybe only 50% of the landscape ratio. I like the horse with the waterfall in this image. But my favorites are in the portrait aspect ratio. We get a mix of photorealistic photography images and stylized images of mostly guys with capes looking at a waterfall. Results. So there we go. When combined with Stylize 1000, even the cursed style generates some nice looking images. Yes, some are not good even with the Stylize 1000, but I think the cursed style has some promise. It is the most photorealistic looking style when combined with the Stylize, although the images don't look as sharp as the default 4B style. But in the comparison of the nicer looking images of Stylize 1000 of cursed style, the clear winner of the aspect ratio comparisons is the portrait aspect ratio with overwhelming 12 points. The second place goes to square aspect ratio with 7 points and the third place to landscape aspect ratio with 5 points. So there were some gems in all aspect ratios. The images looked very different in all aspect ratios, basically no similarities at all like there are with other styles usually. But I do hope that you found this overview useful for your own exploration of Midjourney's AI image synthesis. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel if you like this kind of content and would like to see more exploration of Midjourney. Have a wonderful day and let's continue prompting.